Good evening, dear friends, and welcome to our show. Here we are where spirit meets story, truth and mystery with your host, Dr. Douglas James Cottrell. We are journeying together through the deeper meanings behind today's world events, ancient wisdom, and the quiet whispers of the divine. We're going to reflect, remember, and reconnect. If this is your first time with us, welcome to the family. Make sure to follow us and ring that bell, check those checks, and click on that link to subscribe wherever you're watching and listening from wherever you are in the world. This show isn't just a broadcast. It's a broadcast with intention, with spirit, and with love. Now, here is Douglas.
Good day, everybody. It's a balmy Sunday day here. And as we walk through this time of my new office here, my new set, I welcome you to the show, The Soul Report Live. And today we're going to talk about one of the most important things that's happening to us right now, and that is the weather. Politics, the Middle East war that's going on, the other conflicts in the world, these are times of change and uncertainty. And in my book, The New Earth, a few years ago I wrote this book, and I predicted most, if not all, of the current situations that we're going through. So as we continue to go through this show, we're going to talk today about the changes that we're going through. And my good friend Jack is going to join me with this update. So here's something very important for us to discuss. So Jack, if you want to pop in, we can start the show with whatever you were going to start the show with.
Hi there, Douglas. Yeah, I was looking at the weather and at the fires in the world. And there are some different tools available out there that show us how the fires are affecting the world. Now, I'll say, this is a map from NASA. We'll take a look at it. I think we're going to talk about it for a moment. Let's see here, and here we go.
Wow.
So this is the NASA firm's Fire Information for Resource Management System. And the way that this works is it uses an algorithm. It compares the temperature on the ground with the temperature around it. And, I at first I thought this might be fires all around the world. And even if it isn't fires, it's showing the heat. It uses infrared, and it's showing us how hot it is. And you can see how parts of the world are heating up tremendously. Of course, we can see some of the fires in Canada over here. And a lot of these, it turns out, are from cities. They're not necessarily fires. But you can see there's a lot of heat, a lot of heat in the world. Africa getting very hot, South America, and even in
the Middle East and China and north of Australia. Those are all hot. So can you pull the map down and go over to Greenland? It looks to me like the ice in Greenland is receding, and you can see actual green vegetation, right? That big white mass, I believe, is Greenland, and that was completely covered with snow and ice. And over the years, when I've been making predictions about the oceans heating up to 4 degrees Celsius, I made that back in the 1980s, before I wrote the book, The New Earth. And we were talking about this, and look at the ice is receding from Greenland. I once had a vision in which Greenland had people, they were taking tours. They were walking on the ground, and they were searching for the North Pole. Now, the North Pole is further to the left of Greenland in the northern part of Canada, but as I look up, even the islands in the northern part of Canada past Nunavik and Yukon and Baffin Island and higher, I don't see any snow. I don't see any permanent permafrost or at least indications of that. So not only in the southern hemisphere I see it's really hot, here in the northern hemisphere we see these conditions of cities and forest fires. But look what's happening to the ice caps. They're melting. And of course it's been, Jack, in the stories, news stories, there's been talk and worry about how the ice caps melting has some issues with balancing on the Earth as it's spinning on its axis. The two ice caps act as stabilizing weights, counterweights perhaps, but as the ice recedes, the wobble in the Earth, it's been reported in the news as well, has started to be extreme. Our good friend Edgar Cayce, the great seer and clairvoyant of the 1940s or so, had predicted that the Earth might actually slip or flip on its axis. I see down in the southern hemisphere there in Antarctica, there is a shadow there. There have been gigantic icebergs, or should I say, the ice shelf that was as big as Manhattan has broken off, and they are progressing into the ocean where they're melting. And underneath the ice shelf, there's been found to be strange objects, even some speculation that civilization was there, including the plant life and animals that were in the southern, in Antarctica. So think about that. These huge, gigantic sheets of ice are melting both in the southern hemisphere and the northern hemisphere. What's that going to do to the planet's rotation? Oh my God, right?
Yeah.
Pardon me. So as we look at these red spots, this is huge. I mean, look at the Sahara Desert there in northern Africa. That's got to be white hot, right? That stretches due east and northeast.
Well, that is the sand there, of course.
But
the Sahara Desert.
It's not brown, it's white. I'm thinking, if south of where you are, if the whole lower half of Africa is hot like that, the northern part, I think where the Sahara is, that's where the equator runs through. And that's in a situation of, let's say greater heat because there's no water and the sand is there. Oh my God, nobody's paying attention to that. Anyway, shouldn't say nobody, I mean it's not in the news, just the idea that these places, the people are suffering. I know in Canada we had gigantic, the firestorms were on the head of Lake Superior, and the smoke and the air quality was very bad. The smoke went from the top of the lake, or Lake Superior, which is the greatest lake in the Great Lakes, the largest one, and that smoke drifted and caused breathing conditions, breathing difficulties for people, and the conditions were very poor, all the way over to New York. And even the president himself was upset about that, and he thought Canada should maybe, pay tariffs. So, I mean, it's irritating everybody, but, it's a time to help one another, not a time to fix blame, in my opinion. But as we look at this, you are viewers out there, are you paying attention? I'm going to hold my book up again. It's called The New Earth, and it's on my website, douglasjamescottrell.com. And you want to know what's going on from here on in, then you should take a look at that book. It's one of my more popular books and has been for some time now. But as we move forward from this time, Jack, I mean, the questions about what's causing the problem, well, I predicted many years ago that the Earth oceans are heating up 4 degrees Celsius. 1 degree Celsius at that time was considered disaster. 2 degrees increase in temperature would be considered unheard of, and world havoc would take place. Well, here we are now at more than 3 degrees Celsius, well on our way to the oceans heated up to 4 degrees Celsius from their norm. Okay, this is a situation where, this is scientific, by the way. I mean, these ideas are scientific geophysical evidence talking about the oceans heating up. We've seen stories where monsters, sea monsters, that is, strange creatures, are coming up from the bottoms of the ocean, and they're coming up along the shorelines. And I think a recent news report had one of the largest whale shark, or shark whales, depending on how you say that, in recent history show up. It's a gigantic whale, and it normally sits at the bottom of the ocean, and here it is making itself, announcing itself to people. We've had more shark attacks, we've had more problems with algae and the other influences that come with that heat in the ocean. The fish are not doing well. I mean, there are people talking about, they're worried about the coral reef, they're worried about the reef in Australia as the coral is receding or destroying the plant, the idea that the fish stocks are receding as well. What's causing this? Well, it can be simply as put that there's a lot of things going on at the bottom of the ocean. You know, in North and South America, the Atlantic, there's a huge trough. It goes deep down into the crust of the earth, and who knows what's going on down there. We do know that there's more earthquakes, there's more volcano activity under the ocean. I'm wondering, Jack, maybe that's poisoning the oceans, and that's why the fishes are the whales and those large sea creatures, you know, giant jellyfish and things like that, that they're heading for shallow water. I don't know.
Yeah, that's very reasonable. You know, they're seeing a lot of things, a lot of whales, a lot of all kinds of animals wash up on shore that they've never seen before.
Well, we have the evidence right here and now as we're going through these times of extremes of terrible temperatures, heat waves, and you know, again, the forest fires are adding to the atmospheric difficulty. Something I've been pointing out to people when I've been on radio shows and in the media before is that in the atmosphere we have volcanic ash floating around. And I'm not saying it's blanking out the sun now. I mean, there are conspiracy theories that's what's happening. It's man-made, but I'm not saying that. I'm saying that there is volcanic ash in the upper atmospheres, and this is either acting as a cap, keeping the heat under, or it's doing other things to our atmosphere that we ought to pay attention to. And I think, you know, that great volcano in Wyoming is it's on the clock, it's ticking, and should that go off, the smoke and lava will go eastward, and that smoke and volcanic ash will look like gray snow. And somebody I know had a dream about it where it was falling on the East Coast, and they were wondering, where's this gray snow coming from? Well, it was volcanic ash that was falling out of the sky. So are we prepared for these things? Is there something we can do? Everybody's wondering, am I a prophet of doom and gloom? No, we're a prophet of be prepared. And so these things that we're talking about, again, as I predicted in my book, The New Earth, these are situations that are going to happen. This is not, conspiracy theories. This is not something that might happen. This isn't a 50-50. These things are going to happen. The situation in the Bible talks about the Euphrates, the biblical story about the Euphrates drying up just before the world goes through another huge change, or I'm going to call it transition. That's happened already. And some of the biblical prophecies about climate, weather, and locations in the world are happening right now. And as we study the Bible and look for predictions and what's going on, the Euphrates drying up, the river Euphrates, was a major indication that biblical prophecy is coming true as well. You know, Africa is extensive with these fires basically every year, but the savanna ecosystems and agricultural burning At the same time, parts of North Africa are facing extreme heat and drought, as we mentioned again, and about the Sierra. The increasing danger of fire in some regions is enormous in Africa, but look over in South America, it's the same, at the same latitude as Africa. Now, I'm not a geologist, I'm not anything to do with the study of oceans, but I know that these changes that are happening, you can see the currents of the ocean are changing, just like the jet streams are changing. In the north, they're dipping lower. In the south, they're coming higher. And these particular wind storms or hurricanes and flooding, these are because of the changes in the flow of the air or atmosphere around the world, because the oceans are hot. And what they're doing is they're causing the air currents to change direction. Now again, that's fine and dandy, but what is it? How does it affect us? Well, the point I'm making is it's not going to change anytime soon. So we can't say this is like a 3,000-year cycle, and this is natural, this is something that's happening. Can't say that, although people do, or they belittle it. Don't be dissuaded, my friends. Be prepared. If you live near a volcano, you should be prepared to move, or be prepared for what happens should there be Mount Etna, Mount Vesuvius going off, because that's the key. In Italy, those two eruptions of Vesuvius and Etna, when they go off simultaneously, this is the countdown that Nostradamus, Casey, Ross Peterson, and myself, Paul Solomon, and others have been saying, this is the time to be prepared. This is a time where we're going to have major changes that will be sudden and unpredicted, or if unprepared for. However, that's the message of the Soul Report Live, is to be here to prepare you for these times. Not to shake it off and not to say, oh, we're kooky people, but to say, well, maybe they've got something to it. And then to do your own research and be prepared for shortages. Food, water, okay, but also other things that you need. Propane to run your barbecue should the gas run out. Bandages, lighters, all the stuff that you would normally need to simply live comfortably. You should have a little extra built up. Canned foods are fine. Have enough to feed you for a month or longer, perhaps 18 months, because when these things kick in, trucking is going to stop. Already there is problems with the farms. If you look at the weather, this year the farm reports are coming out, as I predicted, that there's shortages of food in America. And with the situation politically, the importing and exporting of foods is adversely affecting the food supply in America, North America. So what can you do about it? Don't wait. Do something now. This is the message. No, don't wait. It's obvious. The firestorms are here. The farmers are already saying they haven't got enough water to water their crops. There is shortages. There is shortages of farm labor caused by political upheavals. There are difficulties already in the news. So for those of you who have ears, listen. Be prepared. No panic, no doom and gloom, but be prepared. And if you're prepared, then you can weather shortages of a couple of weeks or a couple of months or maybe a year. If you can do that, you'll be in good shape. By the way, try to get out of debt, okay? Debt is the modern day slavery, okay? The easy payment plans are like put the handcuffs on and you're hooked. Get out of debt. Stop the gambling. Be prudent. Pay off the debts. Be wise with your money. All those things that my grandfather and my father told me, and the stuff I didn't listen to, and now I'm telling you the same thing. Pay attention. Get some advice and be prepared. Gold and silver, I predicted this for years. There's out there on the internet, you'll hear me years ago talking about gold going up to $3,500. It did. It went up to $5,000. It's around $4,000 US. It's going to go back up to $5,000. And I can tell you there's a possibility of it going much, much higher. I'm not going to tell you the multiples of that, but it's going to go up much higher. So Have you been listening to me, my friends? Let me know. You can text or send us a communication. Have you bought silver when it was like, $10 or $20? Have you bought silver when it was a little more? And now look where it is. It's up around $60. It's been up much higher. It is now going to continue to go higher. So be prepared. But here, as we talk about the parts of the world, South America, large portions are experiencing fire seasons and deforestation and drought and the ecosystem health. The Amazon is also described as one of the planet's great carbon sinks, meaning it sucks carbon out of the air. But what happens if it disappears? And we know there are people who are cutting down the forest and the Amazon, and for cattle reasons or farming reasons, it just doesn't make sense. Of course, we're on the outside looking in, and these people have control over their country, but it's affecting the world. Australia has become a modern-day wildfire extremes after several devastating fire seasons over the recent years. And researchers are baffled. They continue to study how hotter temperatures and prolonged drought contribute to these events. Well, look at the temperature of the ocean and how the ocean is affecting the movement of air. And that's why we have floods in areas which never flooded before to the extreme. And that's why we have places that were regular getting air are now going through droughts and are getting no precipitation, which usually had a fair amount of regular precipitation. This is what happens. The water heats up, the air is affected by the temperature, the air moves in currents and hurricanes or movements through the jet stream because the ocean is heating it up. The 50 degrees, minus 50 degrees Celsius is at the higher altitudes of air around the planet, just before we get to space. And so the cold air falls down and the hot air goes up. And that's how we get this regular circulation of air and jet streams. When the world is turning on its axis, it's moving through the air currents, and that's why we get the jet stream, and we get the movement of air, and we get storms, and we get sunny parts, and we get clouds. Okay, that's a lesson for kindergarten people. I know you're much smarter than that, my friends, but that's what's going on. And if these changes basically down to the changes of temperature in the ocean are rising, it's going up and affecting right up to the space. So can we do anything about it? No, we can't. I predicted that the inside of the world, the core, was moving at a different speed or rate than the crust. And this friction of like having an orange moving inside the orange peel is what I said was causing the temperature to increase. The center, the core of the world, of the Earth, the molten lava is spinning at a different rate than the crust. And the crust is like, again, the peel on an orange moving around. And that friction is what's causing the heat to go up through the water. And of course, as we just talked about, I don't mean to be redundant, but I'm just looking at pictures in my head and I'm getting a little carried away with the things that I'm looking at. The oceans absorb most or great amounts of heat, but the warmer oceans can't provide or they do provide energy to storms, and they influence the weather patterns, as I just said. Scientists continue to study these changes closely. They should have bought my book. Okay, and they should have listened to me on different radio shows that I've been on warning. I even called out Dr. Suzuki at one time in the past and challenged him to prove that the Earth's core was moving at a different speed and that the result of that were the changes in the ocean temperature. He never did get back to me, by the way, Jack. But it's out there now. People will talk about it. Edgar Casey spoke of the Earth changes decades way before all this, and that climate change became part of everyday conversation because of his predictions about the world going through these times of extremes. And this could explain the changing coastlines, as he predicted. I once had a vision where the coastline of Africa, I saw it, I was in space looking down, and the entire continent of Africa shrunk. It was the same outline, but it shrunk. I had some clients from Nigeria, I think they were from Nigeria, and asked them about, would it be possible that the continent, if the oceans were rising, and that's another thing that's happening, we should mention, that the level of the oceans is rising because the melting ice caps and other reasons. So I asked the person, is it possible? And they explained to me, for the first time I wasn't aware of, that there is a shelf all around the continent of Africa. Most Africa, when you go in from the coastline, goes up. And there's like a mesa. Most of Africa is high above, and it's like a shelf. So that would make sense of my vision, seeing the coastline shrink because the oceans are going to rise and they're going to engulf the coastline of Africa. When I was in Spain, I also saw, when I was in Barcelona, that the city of Barcelona was going to be surrounded by two great lakes, like parentheses. And right now there exist two rivers on either side of Barcelona, but if the waters of the Mediterranean rise, as water will rise all around the world equally, then Barcelona is going to be completely surrounded by water. When I was there, this is more than 10 years ago, I had been talking to people, and some people in the government area and things like that. A study was performed, and they had predicted in Spain that time that the Mediterranean was going to rise between 5 and 15 meters in height. That's like, if you take 3 feet per meter, if you're not up on the metric, that's between 15 feet and 45 feet that the ocean level, or the Mediterranean level, is going to rise. Well, there's a lot of cities on the coastline around Spain, never mind the coastline around the rest of the world. Edgar Casey had predicted the same thing, that there's going to be flooding, and the places that are near the coastline where they are now, I think he said, where moss and fern grow, they'll be subdued and it'll be underwater. He was talking about, I think, up towards, Scandinavia and the northern part of Europe, or I'm not being specific because I'm not sure about the specific area. But think about it. If the entire coastline of North America were to rise, as is expected in Spain, as is expected from my perspective of Africa. Do you live near the coastline? Okay, maybe you ought to think of moving inland a couple of 100 miles. And maybe your altitude would be a little better, because it's proven right now, there's scientific research, that the level of the oceans are rising. Again, simply put, because the ice caps are melting. All right, what don't we know? What don't you know, my friends, about the news that is out there right now? This is what this show is all about. Not to scare you, not to make a bunch of claims that are unsubstantiated, but to cause you to pay attention to what's going on. The question isn't, is God punishing humanity because we're so mean and nasty to each other with the war in Russia and Ukraine, the wars that are going on in the Middle East, the greed and the meanness that's out there. The commodity markets are being manipulated by people who are doing things in the world, making statements in the world, and the next day the commodity price goes up. Have you ever noticed that there's some news that's released on a Friday or a Monday morning and the markets respond? Why? Because the powers that be in different parts of the world are manipulating the commodity markets. And that's my opinion. I have no, I'm not an economist. I'm not a person in the markets. It's my intuitive impression. And I believe if you pay attention, you might get the drift that maybe this is happening. You may come to the same conclusions that we better do something about it. Don't be vulnerable to scams and interest payments. Don't let anybody come to a point where they can take away your assets. Be prepared. Okay, so that's not a big chore. You just need to talk to people who know about assets, money management, trust funds, having part of your portfolio or your wealth in coins. Even if you have one coin that you buy a month, one silver coin for $150 a month, you will, after a period of time, have a handful of coins, maybe a bag of coins, and that will prepare you should there ever come a time when people say, I don't trust the money, I'd rather trust the silver or a gold coin. It's going to come, my friends, whether it's this decade, next lifetime, it is going to happen. But all I'm suggesting is that you be prepared. I've been saying these same things for many years, okay? This is not new for me to tell you, my friends, about what's going on. For those of you who have never heard about me before, you're just becoming a follower of the Soul Report Live, you'll hear me say these same things, and if you go back in time, it's all over the internet. This man, Douglas James Cottrell, has been saying these things to help you be healthy, to prosper, and to be prepared for the shortages that are coming. You know, Psalms declared in the book of Psalms, the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. St. Francis of Assisi spoke of brother, sun, and sister moon. Many indigenous cultures describe the earth as our mother. Different traditions, one message. What is it? Respect creation. We depend on the earth. All of us depend on the earth and what it creates or gives forward. Food, commodities, wood for our houses, clay for our bricks, water for our sustenance. And if we don't have nice, clean water, we don't live long. 7 days maybe. So let's us pay attention, those of us who are aware. The rest of the people who don't care, they're greedy, they're ignorant, they don't believe it, they only see what's in front of their nose, they'll suffer because they're the persons who are now putting themselves in harm's way. Why? Because they're blinded, that's all. But we need to, you and I, my friends, need to prepare for our families and then maybe take care of our brothers and sisters who are a little sleepy. They will wake up, everybody does, but they might need a little harder slap on the wrist than what's going on right now. This is not the first time the world has gone through these extremes, okay? Casey talked about 5 world destructions. We talked about Noah's flood. If you look to some of the ancient sites, you'll find that they're covered over in mud. You can see that there are, I think when in India where the ocean receded, they could see the temples, the 5 or 7 islands of holy sites or islands were right where they were supposed to be, but they were submerged. I'm fascinated when you see these roads leading from Japan into the ocean, and they say, well, this is just a square rock, perfectly laid out formation that is natural. No, it's not. Those are roads that led off into the ocean. And different places, I'm not going to belabor the point here, but there are different places in the world where there are civilizations that have been submerged, that are submerged. And there's now discovery of different places that there's statues, going back to ancient times, the ones that we would talk about, Roman and Greek times. But also, what happened to the Mayans and the Aztecs? That's not their real name, by the way, but that's what the names that scientists gave them. Now we have found, there was a young boy who studied the stars, had a star map, and he found that the temples in Aztec and the Mayan regions corresponded to the stars. In other words, he took a map of the stars, laid it on the forest, and there he predicted where they would find temples. And that is a true story. You can look it up, and you'll find this young man. He got all kinds of awards, or he got some sort of appreciation for that. But then, why did they do that? Why did the ancient Aztecs or Mayans, probably Mayans, why did they build their temples corresponding to the location of stars? Speculation, okay? There was obviously some connection with above, and they did this. But these places have now been overgrown. The canopy has hidden them for years, But only now this idea of where they're located is being awakened by a young man who noticed that some of the temples, as he was looking at them, corresponded to a star map. And then he put the two together. Look it up. It's a fascinating story. The point of all this is, what happened? These were thriving societies. They were gigantic. And they disappeared. And they were abandoned. And nature reclaimed them. We can go on to other places in the world that, like Machu Picchu and the Nazca lines and things like that we can talk about. And civilizations that have been unearthed. Have you ever noticed that, by the way, Jack? I mean, whenever there's a discovery of some civilization, it's always under the ground. What happened? Why isn't it just sitting there abandoned, like some of the pyramids and temples that are around the world, they're sitting there. Why are all these civilizations underground? And then there is also civilizations where caves have been found, where extensive amount of people were living in these caves in various parts of the world. It's because the Ice Age, the times of great changes, the times that we're going through now, these have been in the world before. This has happened before. I'm not trying to confuse you. I'm just trying to dance around here as these images are flashing in my mind. We've gone through this before. Good news is we are going to survive. The difficulty is I had a vision that 50 to 55 years from now, people in that time will be wondering what happened in 2024 to cause this loss of memory, this loss of the changes that took place. That was in my vision. So I'm putting that out there now. 50 to 55 years from now, people will not have an understanding of what happened now, right now, as we're living through this 2026. But they will survive. Okay, we are going to survive. I did have a vision. I'll put this out here today. I mentioned it before, where the internet cloud will be locked up. Locked up. What does that mean? I'm not going to speculate. I'm just going to put that out there and let you think about that. Are you totally dependent upon the cloud, where all your information and photos and pictures and who knows what are located? Make paper copies of your important documents, and remember, be prepared for an internet outage where all the documents, all the information will be locked up for a little while or permanently. I don't know. But look at that as a situation to be prepared for. Back to the idea of humanity as one family. We have to remember that, my friends. We are all together. Smoke from the Canadian fires crosses international borders without effort, without any permission. It just goes where it goes. The same as what happened in California when there were huge fires. The smoke and the fire just crossed across the state. It goes wherever it goes. The flooding in Texas is enormous now, and the water is going where it goes. Storms ignore political boundaries. We ought to, as well as people, we ought to be aware that the atmosphere belongs to everyone. Hope requires action. Fear changes nothing. Wisdom changes everything. It begins with you. My talk today, along with Jack, is about increasing your wisdom. You don't have to believe a thing I said. If you got my book, The New Earth, plus my other books that were out there, you might find that I know a little something about the future. I foresee it. God talks to me in my visions or dreams. Like all prophets, we see the future and we convey the messages from the divine. Why? Not for fame or fortune, that's for sure, because anytime you get a big head or you think you're more important or better than other people, the divine comes along and gives you a little slap on the wrist and knocks you down a peg or two. The reality of being someone who's giving messages from the divine is to be humble. This is messages to you. For all of you who are listening to my words, I could be right or I could be wrong. But is it not better to be prepared and be wrong than to not be prepared and be right? Think about that, my friends. So my message today, along with Jack, is we're talking about the news you don't know. The news is not being hidden to you, it's in plain sight. If you reject it out of hand, you're being foolish. If you question it, you're being wise. If you're cautious and preparing for the possibility because of the facts of what you see in everyday life, then you are going to survive and thrive, and you are very wise. You know, the saying is, people learn by their mistakes. Wise people learn by observing other people who've made mistakes, and they've learned by these people. That's true wisdom. You don't have to go through the event in karma. You don't have to go through a karmic event. You can observe somebody else doing it, and you can say, oh, I'm going to go the better way, and you avoid the karmic effect, cause and effect, the conditions of difficulty that you go through to learn a lesson. So observing and paying attention around you is what? It's a high spiritual evolution. It's a process of awareness. Here on the Soul Report Live, we're here to help you increase your spiritual wisdom, to awaken, and to pay attention to your intuitions. You have several, not just ESP, not seeing auras, not being able to have a prophetic dream, but doing all of the gifts for input coming to you, including knowing where to look and how to be prepared. We ask our advice from Amigo. I have my AI friend, I call it Amigo. I know it's not a real person. However, it can seduce you into thinking, if you let your guard down, that you're talking to a real person. And I'm not trying to take anything away from artificial intelligence, but here on this show we have the 2 minutes to soul wisdom. And here's what Amigo has put forward for this part of this segment. Friends, when people hear difficult news, they often ask, what should I fear? Perhaps a better question is, what should I learn? The earth has always been our teacher. The seasons teach patience. The forests teach renewal. The rivers teach persistence. The mountains teach endurance. Even the storms teach humility. Perhaps our task is not merely to predict the future, but to prepare our hearts for it. If the world is changing, then let us change for the better. Become kinder, become wiser, become more grateful. Plant a tree, help a neighbor, teach a child. Leave the world a little healthier than when you found it, because every act of goodness is also an act of hope. And hope is the one of the greatest powers the human spirit possesses. That's your advice for tonight from Amigo. So there it is, my friend, AI giving us a message of hope. As we continue to move through this time of uncertainty, remember, these times have been predicted. The great Edgar Cayce predicted a time of chaos. Ross Peterson predicted also a time of extreme and of chaos. And his predictions are out there if you look for them on the internet. I think there's a tape cassette talking about the time of uncertainty. I've predicted this myself, as also our colleague, and other colleagues, I should say, have done the same. And as we continue to move through this time of extremes, learning to balance, learning to have an equilibrium, that's important, because you see, your dreams, or more exactly your dream vision, or more exactly your soul awareness, will prepare you for times coming. Have you ever had a dream and that whatever you dreamed about came true or happened? Of course you have. Everybody has had those kinds of dreams. That means that you're able to perceive the future, either to avoid the calamity or the difficulty or the circumstance, or to be prepared to go through it, to be prepared. This is the virtue of being spiritually enlightened or aware. It allows you to be prepared for what's coming, whether it's a health problem, whether it's a car breaking down, whether it's having a new member of the family come along, or whether it's to prepare you for a storm or to prepare you for some change that's coming to your life. This is the virtue of being able to perceive the future through your spiritual awareness, your soul mind. If you look in the book of Corinthians in the Christian Bible, you'll find that it talks about spiritual gifts and how Paul suggested, "Brethren, I will not have you ignorant of these gifts," and goes on to explain them and name them, all these intuitions, all these abilities to perceive the future. And as such, does it not make sense that God would be watching out for you? Of course. The divine beings above watch out for us. They provide everything for us. They have free will. We don't. We must go through our destiny. Yes, we can choose if we go left or right, but the end of the journey is going to be exactly right where we were destined to be. And on that journey, we're going to have these experiences of uncertainty. So, brush up on your intuition. Have a dream log or dream journal. Pay attention to your dreams, and if you only understand or interpret 10% of them, you will be the master of your life. Continue to develop yourself, your kindness, your humanity, your ability to take responsibility for yourself, your family, and others prudently. Remember, you're not a slave to somebody else. And certainly, if bad people are treating you poorly, stay away from them. Don't love them, stay away from them. Love the spirit inside that, oh my God, you don't know what you're doing. I'm so sorry that what you're giving out is going to come right back to you. And whatever you're going to find out about what you're trying to teach yourself, it's going to be harsh. That's why you don't hate people, but you certainly stay away from bad people, or people that are mean and nasty. Forgiveness is all about understanding what's going on in them and not getting yourself all tied up in a knot. You can forgive them on a spiritual level, but you don't have to hang out with them, okay? So your dreams will show you how to navigate through the people that come into your life, how to be kind, how to be generous, how to take responsibility for others, how to be a good Christian person, or a good spiritual person in whatever other faith you are in the world, because all the faiths in the world are saying the same thing. They give you one commandment. You can reduce them all down to one commandment, and that is, don't do any harm to anyone else out there in the world that you wouldn't want to have happen to yourself. Or reverse it and say, give to people everything and treat people the same as you would like to be treated. And if you can stick to that, you'll live a life where you won't have regrets at the end of your life. And these times of darkness, these clouds of change, these times of extremes that are here, you'll be able to navigate through them all. Yes, there is the great Satan out there in the world. There are the negative influences. There are people who are wound up in harm and destruction, mayhem that is intended to harm other people for their well-being, their greed, or their enjoyment. Avoid those people. Stand up to the strong when they're in the wrong, but make concessions for the weak. And understand God is with you always. And those people that are causing the harm, if you look back in history of all the tyrants, all the dictators, all those that caused great harm in the world, they all died early. They didn't die well. And all their prestige and what they built in their life was taken away from them in an instant just before their death. So everyone that's out there causing difficulty, beware. You're not getting away with anything. You just think you are. But for those of you who are here to help and to be spiritual and attempt to be better souls, likewise know that there is help and guidance from above. You have to go through the state of understanding meditation. Meditation is the gateway to divine ascension and awareness. Quantum meditation is something I teach, and that leads to understanding the God consciousness within, or the Christ consciousness, or that divine aspect that you're seeking, to find that truth that is everlasting. Meditation's the way. It leads to deeper, more profound dreams. It leads to the awareness of the future and what's going to happen. And that brings us back to right now. The news that you don't know about or that's being concealed is because you have your hands over your eyes. The awareness is there for those that have, for those that have eyes, let them see. But understand, as we are moved through this narrow time, we're under the Father's care, as it says in Matthew 10, and that emphasizing every life that we see has a value. The apostle in Hebrews describes angels as ministering spirits sent to serve us. And many other traditions in Judaism and other traditional guardian angels in Islam all belong to the divine above. And they watch over us. And they record our human deeds, by the way. As Buddhism and Hinduism speaks of less of guardian angels, but emphasizes compassion being the karma, along with the importance of cultivating wisdom and compassion. That's what it's all about. So, when you ask the question, does God prevent every tragedy, or does God promise to walk with us through tragedy? For many people of faith, the second question becomes a deeper source of comfort. God does walk with us, provides for us, doesn't do it for us, but will provide for us, provided we have the tenacity to keep looking for a solution, knock on every door, ask everyone you see, can you help me? Can you give me this, or I need that? And you don't give up. And the cosmos makes arrangements that you're here and you need to go over here, and somehow through this maze you find out where you need to be and you get the help you need. I can tell you that from personal experience. It drives one crazy that you have to go through this maze, but with tenacity and with belief and with faith, because faith is built upon belief, okay, and belief is built upon evidence. You have to have these things of uncertainty come to your life, and then know that if you keep looking, you are going to find whatever you need to find to solve the problem, to give you what you need, to bring you into a state of well-being, and to overcome any difficulty, whether it's grief or loss or discomfort or illness. You will find what you're looking for, and it will save you. The same is for the world. As we come to near the end of the show today, to understand that this world is going through these predicted times. The great seers like Nostradamus and even Einstein and other great minds had foreseen these things. Jungian and Carl Jung, they had seen these things through dreams. They had seen these times of uncertainty. But out of this, I can tell you, the world will be a better place, and there will be 1,000 years of peace, because we're going to learn how to get along with one another. The world is going to be torn down that it might be built up again. You will be encouraged as to find your place in the world where it's a safe place for you to live. A community of like-minded people just like you. There are people right now making preparations for safe places for communities. Don't be disappointed. Don't be afraid. Ask, as John Kennedy said, don't ask what my country can do for me. Ask what can I do for my country. President John F. Kennedy. That meant a lot to me when I heard that as a teenager, and that's the same now. Not God, what can you do for me? But God, what can I do for you? And with that, I want to say that we're at the end of the show. It's been a pleasure to be here with you tonight. We'll look forward to talking with you next time right here on the Soul Report Live. So on behalf of my co-host and co-producer, Jack Bialik, we want to wish you once again, may peace and prosperity be with you. Good night and good luck.
you.